Welcome everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Carren's Couch. Oh my goodness, I tell you what, I am so incredibly excited to introduce you to today's guest. So many of us, it feels like we kind of fly a bit blind in our lives. It feels like we're not really sure which direction we're going in or what we're doing. And there are so many questions. And a lot of us turn to people who are psychic readers or spiritual mediums just to try to get some certainty or sense of certainty about our lives. And it feels like everything in our lives, it comes together as it comes together. But the one thing that we seem to miss in life is certainty. And without that certainty, it gives us a sense of unpredictability where we're just not sure who we are, what we should do. And we're always questioning the future and we're always questioning what we've done. But one thing that drove me to today's guest was, I guess it was probably about a month ago. I was sitting in a place where I thought, I just can't keep repeating what I've always done. And it's as if the way that our brains are wired it's as if we've got these trained monkeys that live between our two ears that just continuously repeat the past, repeat what we've done, tell the same stories, go through the same roller coasters, go through the same motions, but just different experiences. So it's still the same version of me, just going through different experiences. And oftentimes we look for our lives to unfold in completely different ways, but we don't know how to make that happen because it's the same version of us going through the next experience. And I was online and I was going through this frustration, and I just thought, I just need a major shift. I really do. I need a major shift in my perspective. I need major clarity. I just can't keep doing the same thing on a different day and expecting a different result because life just doesn't unfold like that. And I just got to the point of absolute frustration and exhaustion. And I typed in Google. And my mum and myself have always had the most extraordinary conversations about astrology. And my mum is really ahead of her time. And she says to me, my darling, why don't you look into astrology and see what answers lie in astrology for you? Just see if there's anything there. And my natural inclination was to grab my local newspaper and read my star signs, because I'm an Aquarian. So I read my star signs, and of course it tells me nothing. And then I grab my local Women's Weekly and I read that, and of course that tells me nothing. And it's all predicting the future. And I'm really not into that because I feel like if I'm predicting the future, that could potentially just be a self-fulfilling prophecy anyway. And what's the point of that? I wanted something concrete. I wanted something that was of value. I wanted something that was really going to help me open my eyes to who I really was, what I really am. What is my real potential? Because sometimes, and I know that our listeners feel the same way, sometimes we just lose sight of it. Sometimes we just lose sight of who am I? What am I here for? What's the real reason? And let me jump into bed with that. Let me get intimate with who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing and what my purpose is and why I even draw breath every morning. There's got to be a bigger reason. There's got to be more to life. And when I got online and I started doing some serious research beyond my horoscopes, I found our guest, Anne Ortelee. I found Anne's website, astroanne.com. And I found her and I found myself mesmerized. I found myself lost in the articles that she writes. I started listening to some of the podcasts that she's produced, and she's got 3 amazing podcasts that she produces, which I'll share with you guys throughout the show. But when I started looking at what she's creating and the way that this woman speaks, she is one of us. Let me tell you, she is an enlightened being that is so clear. And the beautiful thing about Anne is that she is giving. She shares what she knows. She wants it out in the world. She wants the world to become a better place. And everything that she's doing is about how we can create a better world for ourselves as individuals, and then how we can create a better world for the world collectively. So I could not keep her to myself. I could not stop you guys from getting to know her and meeting her. And I'm telling you, honestly, even after the conversation I've just had with Anne off the show, I don't know, Anne, I haven't said this to you yet, but I think we might just make you a regular on the show because honestly, talk about a kindred spirit, somebody who is totally connected to the kind of things that are important to us. So please, if you're in your car, if you're out having a run, or if you're sitting down watching the show or you're listening to the show on a podcast, just get excited. And if you can clap your hands, because we have got Anne Ortelee, my friend. Welcome to Carren's Couch. Thank you for sharing the next half an hour with us.
Thanks, Carren. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me too. So, yay!
Yay!
And I want you to know that the couch is across the Atlantic because I'm in New York City. It's a very big couch, thanks to the beauty of the internet. Yeah.
I do love that. I love how it takes a local world and makes it global with ease.
Yes, with ease.
With ease. With ease.
With ease. Yes, connect kindred spirits with ease.
Oh, now there's got to be a show in that.
Yes, totally.
So, Anne, let's just start with the first thing, because we were talking offline, and I think that there's a really important distinction that we've got to make between the kind of work that you do and the kind of insight that you have and the knowledge that you have through all of your incredible education. What's the distinction between reading a horoscope in a magazine or a newspaper and what you do? And then I'd really love for us to go through your background so that our listeners know that they're in really safe hands when it comes to astrology and today's show. So what's the difference? What's the difference between our local rags astrology and forecasting versus what you do?
Well, I think I was kind of a little like you, Carren. When I used to read my sun sign, I knew it. I was a Virgo, and I would read it every week and, every day, depending on when I bought the papers or the magazines. And I always thought it was interesting, but, didn't really pay a lot of attention to it. And I had a 14-and-a-half-year relationship end. He met somebody else and ran off with her. And I was a mess. And my friends were like, well, maybe you should have an astrology reading. And I'm like, an astrology reading? What are you talking about? And so, after nagging me a little bit, because a lot of times when you're at those big turning points and you're lying on the ground going, I don't think I can go on, I did go. And about halfway through the reading, I said to the guy, the astrologer who read me, I said, so there was this guy. And he goes, what was his birthday? And he opens up this book of numbers. It's called an ephemeris. And he starts talking about our relationship and what went on in it and what happened and what behind the scenes, in front of the scenes. And I was just like, did you have a video camera? How do you know all that?
Yeah.
So the reading was on Friday. And Monday I called and I said, I want to know how you did that. For one reason, never to do it again, on my side. But two, like, how'd you know all that stuff from just looking at numbers in a book? Because I was looking at what he was looking at. Because at that point I was in sales. Right. And we were taught to read upside down, and be able to snoop on what people's desks were, what was on people's desks. So I started studying with him in the fall. And about a month or two into it, I'm like, how come they don't teach this to us in grammar school, like math and English? We should all know our charts. We should all understand how rich the history of astrology is and how wise. And it is the basis of many, many, it used to be taught in universities. Hippocrates was the Hippocratic Oath.
Yeah.
He said, if you're a bad astrologer, you're a bad doctor. It was medicine before there was before there were MRIs and X-rays. And I know archetypes, Jung and Freud used it with their clients. I'm on the board of the Jung Foundation here in New York.
I spotted that on your bio. That's amazing.
Well, Jung had charts on all his patients. And one of the guys said to me, well, this sounds like Jung's archetypes. I'm like, Jung got it from astrology. It was the ancient psychological tool that people used. And what we see when we're looking at a sun sign column, which is what we read in the magazines, is we see one of 12 points. So in the same way that the sun represents our ego purpose, all these other things represent our emotions, our desires, what makes us feel safe, what our work is in the world, how we get what we want, how we communicate, what we're afraid of, where we find God, and where we go through our profound transformations. and it's laid out. Horoscopos is a picture of the hour that you were born. So it says, where are you going to play out the story of your life? So it's a very powerful tool. And all we're looking at when we look at the sun sign is just one of the points available. So really what an astrologer does is they look at all the points, and they talk about, and some of them are friendly with each other, and some of them are nice neighbors, and some of them argue, and some of them, squabble a bit like siblings, and others are really nasty to each other. And so you can look at a chart and see where your planets get along and where they don't. And then more importantly, once you know that, how to work with them, right? Because every energy can be positive or lower form, higher or lower. Default is lower, because it's just easier. But if you work consciously with your energies and you say, okay, how do I consciously make this better? It elevates. And I do a lot of work with parents, with their children, like how to get the kid higher. And when I was first learning, my friend was a Capricorn, a lot of earth energy, very practical, reliable, dependable. And she had a little water child, incredibly emotional. Pisces, Scorpio, Cancer mothers all know about this. Kid's very emotional, picks up everything. And I said, put her in the bathtub and put her in the shower. She picks up all the energy from everybody around her, put her in a tub and detox her. So one day when Lindsay was 4, she's stomping and yelling, and she goes, I know, I need to take a shower. And she stomped off.
Bless her little heart.
Yep, she stomped off into the bathroom and returned a changed child. And so at 4.5, she knew how to self-care because her mother had me, being. And I think that's the beauty of astrology. It teaches us how to self-care, how to feed ourselves and take care of ourselves on a basic level. If we do Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basic level, food, shelter, warmth, security. How do we feed those needs? How do we take care of ourselves? And if you have somebody's chart, you can feed their moon and make them feel incredibly nurtured and cared for. And then once they're cared for, then the rest of the chart blooms. And I think it's really a shame that we don't learn it like math. We should really all know our charts and how to take care of ourselves. And astrology shows us that. It also shows us, when we're going to have bad times or stressful times, but then it also presents an opportunity for how to look at that in a different way. Because everything that happens to us as part of our experience here on Earth is to help us grow in service to our purpose, to our soul's belief, our soul's yearning, what we're yearning for. Your comment before, what did I yearn for? I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. I want to evolve and grow. And we do evolve and grow, just like plants do over the course of our lifetime. So knowing where you are in your evolutionary cycle is incredibly valuable, because then you're going to go, okay, this is the passage I'm going through now, and this is what it's teaching me, and this is how I learn to work with it. So it's a beautiful, beautiful system. And the fact that every single culture has had it for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, just says that it's a universal system that works because it's been in place for all those years.
So let's talk about that. So where did your experience come from? And how do we know that it works? What's the evidence? Is there evidence for it? Or is it just a feeling?
No, there's lots of evidence.
What's your background first? Tell us about you. We really want to know about you.
Okay. All right. My background, raised Roman Catholic, upstate New York, Rochester. Dad was a doctor. Mom was a nurse. Scientific family. Right. You there? You hear me? Okay. Yeah. Tone went quiet on there. Scientific family. I was the oldest child, brother and a sister. And Catholic high school and college, grammar school was public. And then moved to New York, worked in computer sales, methods and procedures, programming for a while. I programmed first and then went into sales. And then had my own computer business. And then that was the point when I ran into astrology. Yeah, right. I was working in my business, and my partner was working with me too. And then my life fell apart, kind of blew up. Yeah. And I was like bereft, but I also had, nights free. So I could study astrology. And so I studied astrology starting in the fall of 94. And then about 2 months in, I'm like, we should all learn this.
Where did you study astrology? Where did you first begin your study?
A living a living room downtown on 19th Street with the guy who I had the reading with in June.
Oh,
I
gotcha.
started studying. He said, I'm starting a beginner class in the fall.
Right.
I said, sign me up. So I signed up and I sat on his couch for 2.5 years.
Wow.
A lot of astrology is an oral tradition. I mean, you can learn it from books, but it's very didactic and interactive, and the charts come alive. So I teach here in New York. I teach on the internet too, and I teach at conferences around the world. So there are conferences you can go and learn it at too. But it is largely a calling, I think, in many ways. You get called to it.
Yeah.
And so I fell in love with it. And then I was doing it kind of part-time and working my corporate gig. And my birthday happens to be 9/11. And I'm a Virgo, so Virgos are a little neurotic. All the Virgos out there, totally, we worry a lot about things. And I was like, well, just work a little more money in the bank, a little more money in the bank. And my office blew up because my birthday was 9/11. And it was two blocks from the Trade Center. So I didn't have an office to go back to. So I kind of went, well, you can go to work and die, or you can go be an astrologer. So then so in the fall of 2001, I became an astrologer full time. And I've never looked back. It's been great. So, but I've been reading charts since 95.
So you, not only do you give readings to people like me, just normal people, but then you also teach people who feel like they do have that calling, and you can do that around the world. So if we've got listeners in Spain, and we've got listeners in Russia, and we've got listeners in Sweden, if they wanted to be taught by you, they could access you?
I have webinars, that I teach on, and I teach, I'm going to be making it a little more robust than it is right now, programs where people can sign up and learn astrology. Yeah.
Cool.
But I think the other part of it is what happens is when you run into it and you go, wow, this is what I need to learn. A lot of the people I teach aren't going to necessarily be astrologers. They're acupuncture people, they're therapists, they're crystal healers or Reiki healers or body workers. They're already working in some modality. In some cases, they are, people that are prominent in the field of helping people evolve and grow and become the best they can be. It very, very much varies. So the people I teach versus the people I read for, I think all of us, the universal consistency across my client and student base is wanting to make the world a better place, and that we are really the hands that can do it. And so we have to know how to do it, and how do we work with that energy productively.
So let's take me as an example, because I just love to talk about myself. So let's take me as an example. I am, from what I know, I'm an Aquarian as a sun sign. I have a Leo rising and a Scorpio moon.
Okay, well let me just put you in. I'm going to just do you.
So for all of our listeners out there,
what's your birthday?
1st of February.
Year?
1970.
70?
70, yes.
And time?
I think it was 4:53 a.m.
Okay, and in place?
Pretoria, South Africa.
Okay.
So that's a lot of information for our listeners. So if you thought you didn't know me before, now you do.
And they all now have your chart. All right.
Yeah.
So you're what we call a double Aquarius. You're Aquarius rising and an Aquarius sun, and your moon's in Sag.
Oh, is that right?
February 1st, 1970, 1970, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
you're what we call a double.
So I'm not an Aquarian with a Leo and a Scorpio moon.
Not February 1st, 1970, 4:53 in the morning. No, you in Pretoria. You are you're a Sag moon. If you were born a little bit before that, before 4:53, you're going to have a Scorpio moon.
Oh, there you go. Isn't that amazing?
Because your moon is 0 degrees 36 minutes. So about an hour earlier, you would have been a Scorpio moon. Yeah.
So when we look at our sun sign, which most people are familiar with, what is a moon and what is a rising? What are those? Because When I first discovered those, I was reading some books and discovered that they were different aspects of my personality. For those of our
Right.
listeners that are not familiar with that, what do they represent?
Well, each of the planets represent a different part of your character or part of your being, or, kind of who you are. So the moon is your emotional nature and what makes you feel nurtured and cared for and loved. So you have a moon on the planet Neptune, which is a spiritual seeker. If it's Scorpio, it's a tortured spiritual seeker. You seem a little more upbeat than tortured, but,
Right.
Scorpio moons are very intense and passionate and very private, would never give their birth information over the phone, over the radio like that.
Oh.
They would have just said, can you look at my chart and just say a couple nice things? Or they wouldn't even bring their chart up. Sag moon goes, let me use myself as a teaching example.
Yeah, right.
It's a natural teacher. Your instinct is to teach.
Yeah.
And it teaches from an emotional wholeness place. So your moon it explains who you are as a person emotionally. A lot of times we think that's who you were in a past life. You were a Sag, the last lifetime. And it also is what makes you feel nurtured. So you feel nurtured by travel, by religious, by spiritual seeking, by reading, by teaching, by learning. You love spicy foods. You love eating exotically. There's a whole adventure girl side of you that's part of that moon in Sag. And your mother is a very wise philosopher in your lifetime, and you're very connected to Mom, it looks like. As an Aquarius.
I am.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah,
my
she's
mum.
your mom is really nice. Yeah.
And she
and
studies
as
philosophy.
I would bet she does. I wouldn't be surprised if she was a teacher of it. Yeah. I bet, really global philosophy, like the belief systems and why we believe what we believe. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, and you've nailed it.
Yeah, well, that's the moon. So that's one part. And then your sun, which we know we have a sun, and we know the moon moves the tides on Earth. It's a big deal where the moon is and what we're born emotionally, what's important to us. The ego, which is what you're learning to develop in this lifetime, is the humanitarian nature of Aquarius. So Aquarius is the time in the growing season when we have finished all the work of the field and we're really working as a collaborative community with people. And we're helping other people figure out how to create the best thing it can be. So Aquarians are natural humanitarians, and they are very much about the big picture, the visionary. They help people see the patterns inherent, and they are very forward thinkers. They think ahead of everybody else. They kind of get there before other people, and they wait for the rest of us to catch up because they understand that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
They're the people that come up with the things that the rest of us go, wow, how did we live without this? And they're the ones that see it and create it. And then Aquarius rising says you work well with groups. You work for the greater good of humanity, for the collective. And being an Aquarius rising, it gives you a vision of how can I make this experience that I'm experiencing, make it relative, valuable, and bring it out to the world. Then we look at where all the other planets are. And in your case, you have a number of planets in the first quadrant, which makes you very active and dynamic. You have a number of planets in the fourth quadrant, which is a lot about working for the greater good of humanity in practical, reliable, dependable ways. And then you have people that really say to you, okay, here's the bad news. How do I make it good news? And you have there's a silver lining on every cloud. You lose an earring, you find $10, and your life kind of goes that way.
Yeah.
Because between the greater benefic and the greater malefic, they have a relationship. So nothing comes in that you can't figure out how to make it a teaching experience, a teaching moment, or transform it in some way. If we look at your path in the world, it's to go from the detailed, daily, reliable stuff into understanding the spiritual component of every moment and that we're all interconnected. And your job is to teach people how to work with their interconnections and to let them see how the interconnections happen in the world. Now, you should know, ladies and gentlemen listening, I've never talked to Carren except for 10 minutes before the show started. So if you've listened to me nodding and going, yeah, that's who she is, that's who she is.
Oh, my God.
I will say until about 4:30 my time, which I guess is 7:30 in the morning your time, we've never talked. Yeah. So each of the planets means something, and they all have a conversation. Now, you're also born with what's called a balsamic moon, meaning your chart is about having intense relationships with people that are transformative, and then poof, the relationship continues, or poof, it goes away. And either way, something has changed. And like balsamic vinegar, on the bottom of the barrel, it's very piquant. So people always walk away learning something from you, or learning something from their exchange or their experience with you.
That's amazing, Anne.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I'm sitting here completely and utterly gobsmacked. You know, I've never been down this path. I've never really had anybody, explain who I am and why I am the way that I am. I've just kind of lived with it and gone, okay, well, that must be it. But, it's quite interesting sitting here listening to you, and I'm taking notes furiously, even though this call is being recorded.
Being recorded.
Because it kind of, it's what I'm finding really amazing about this conversation is that when I have a label, or when we have a label for our behavior and why we behave that way, it makes sense. Therefore, it's not a mystery anymore.
Right.
And then we can use it purposefully and on purpose.
Right.
And that's what I'm sitting here looking at going, yeah, I am that spiritual seeker. I don't know that I'm a tortured seeker, so I don't think that I would be Scorpio. I think you're right.
No, Scorpio moons, they don't think their mothers love them either. You know your mother loves you.
Oh,
yeah.
I do. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I have an amazing...
Sag moons are most beloved. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And it's amazing because my sister is Sagittarian and she studies philosophy at uni, and my mum is studying philosophy, and she's just completed her BA of creative writing, and she's 73. And she's now going and doing a postgraduate in philosophy, and she's never been happier. She's been the ultimate ahead of her time woman, which has just been wonderful for me as a kid growing up with that. I just think this is exceptional, and you are so spot on. So what are you looking at there? Are you looking at a set
I'm
of
looking at
charts, or what are you?
Nope, just your natal chart. I haven't progressed you or looked at it. I mean, I can then look at where you are evolutionary wise, what you're working on now, what the current challenges are. There's a whole bunch of ways you can progress the chart, because we ripen like fruit, like a rutabaga or a tomato or an apple. We ripen over time.
Yeah.
So when you were 18, you went off on your own. And then from 18 to 48, you were a Sag. You're a Pisces, rather. And then at 48, you turned into an Aries. And are then moving forward in that direction as an Aries. So you basically go through phases of growth in life, where we ripen we ripen over time. So you can look at anybody and see how ripe they are, where they are, you don't know how they're necessarily deploying their consciousness, but you do know where they are and what they're working on. So it's, it's the same way a grape grower can go and pinch the grapes and see how ripe they are. An astrologer can look and see what's ripening in your life.
So you and I, we are so having a session. I'm going to book in a session as soon as this call is over. You can bank on that.
Okay.
I think it's so exciting. And for all of our listeners, Anne does actually do one-on-one sessions. And she's offering a $25 discount to everybody that's listening to the show. So if you're interested to be able to know who you are and label it so that you can pull it out and use it on purpose, I think this is the greatest thing. I'm so ecstatic that we're doing this show. And tell me, that's what we've spoken about is kind of on an individual level and looking at me. Talk to us about humanity on a collective perspective.
On the collective, okay.
Because we are, we've only got to look out at our news, and we've only got to see here in Australia and globally the unbelievable pain and suffering that's occurring amongst humanity. And, I personally, as you obviously well know, I am humanitarian, so I find it very challenging to even watch the news now. So I've chosen not to watch it because the pain that I feel on behalf of humanity is breathtaking for me. Where are we going, and what can we all do individually and collectively to start to get a shift of awareness and a shift in consciousness to bring this world to peace?
Well, I think it's a couple things. It's to recognize that all the stuff that's going on in the world is taking place somewhere in your chart.
Personal
so every
charts?
time, because
You're right.
Because the premise of Hermes Majestus is as above, so below, as without, so within. So when we look at the world and we see chaos and craziness, we also can look and see compassion and kindness. We can look and see beauty and grace. We can look and see fear and abandonment. And our job as humans is to say which we want to choose. So our choice point always, and this is the beauty of astrology to my mind, is we can choose to work with the energies higher or lower. So in your case, you're saying, I'm not going to look because I find it depresses me. And it takes me off my path.
Yeah.
My path is to inspire people to think about what their vision is and to think about what they want to do to create in the world. So if I can't help them do that, then I'm not taking care of myself. Similar to the way we say, put on your oxygen mask before you help your child if the plane becomes disabled. So first we have to do self-care. Then second, when we're looking at the world and we're watching the crazy, we know that somewhere in our life that's happening too. And in that space in our life, we can step forward and act with compassion and kindness. And then we energetically are shifting the world because we are all interconnected. The beauty of the internet, good, bad, or indifferent, the beauty of the global world, the beauty of the space programs, looking down this little blue and green globe spinning and then looking out at all the other stuff out there, is realizing how precious our world is and how we really need to cherish it. So throughout history, there's an excellent book by a guy named Richard Tarnas, Tarnas, called Cosmos and Psyche. And he talks about the global periods of history and how they change. And what's happening right now, Carren, is we're at a very big choice point in our world where we get to decide, what are we going to do with it? And so part of the energy is how do we keep our own vision focused on our light?
Yeah.
And how do we shine our light and help other people go forward? Now, you're a fire person. You have a lot of fire in your chart. The last couple of years, there's been a lot of water in the sky. So everybody's been feeling very sloggy, kind of held down, kind of mushy and psychological and crying and feeling like they're rolling through the mud. Starting on the 23rd of December, we're going to go into a fire trine, which is a lot of fire in the sky. So all the fire and air people like you, because you're an air sign and a fire sign, are going to feel so much better the first 6 months of 2015. Then we go back into the mud a little bit for the summer or your winter.
Yeah.
For the months of July, August, and June, end of July and August and June, July, and August. And then we go back into fire again, but with a practical nature and say, this is how we're going to do it. It's a global turning point for all of us. It started back in March of 2011, right. And it really finishes this spring. And so the universe is making us all aware of the choices that we face. And we do face choices every day in terms of how we live. And what I like to think of astrology as doing, when you see something going on in the world and you go, oh my God, you can go, how can I personally help that? Whether I send it love in a prayer, whether I post it on Facebook, whether I just kind of quietly meditate and, or I say, I can't watch this because what they're teaching me from the TV and the media is fear, be afraid.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live in fear.
Yeah.
I want to believe in the greater good of humans. It's about understanding that we all have choices, and our choice is to find our light and keep it burning and keep it bright. And we are at big turning point times. And so understanding that this is a period of time that happens once every 50 years. The last time it happened was the 60s. And we're at a major, back then we had this in the United States, we had the civil rights movement, the women's movement, and the gay movement. And we're basically having a reprise of that with black men getting shot down or strangled in the streets of New York. Yeah. And, as a culture, what do we want? Well, there's all these people out protesting very quietly saying, Black lives matter, our lives matter, all life matters. And I think there's this challenge to be afraid, be very afraid. No, we're all equal here. Let's work on how do we make it a better world. And I think that's the challenge for all of us, is to stay focused in our center, because we're all here to do something. Everybody's got a purpose. I can look at your chart and tell you your path. I can look at anybody's chart and tell them their path. I can't always say how they're doing it. I can tell them where they're afraid. I can tell them where they're scared. But it's understanding that if it's in your heart to do something, it's somewhere in your chart. Your chart is called to it. Your mother was called to go learn philosophy.
Yeah.
And she raised her kids, and she raised you and your sister, and she worked with your dad and did all that. And now she's in her 70s, and she's like, wow, I'm going to go do the thing I love to do. I'm going to be a philosophy major. I'm going to inspire everybody that talks to me. You're going to talk about her on your show. All your listeners are going to go, wow, when I'm 73, I can go back to school too.
Yeah.
And that's an inspiration for many people.
Yeah.
That she was able to do it now, but she didn't say, hey, I'm too old, let me sit in the rocking chair. It's understanding that we all have choice about how we live our life. And what the chart shows is what your natal tendencies are. And then we talk about how you work with them to get your heart's dream, your heart's desire. Some people could say, why are you going back to school at your age? You're not going to be able to teach or make money with it. And she's like, I just want to go learn.
Absolutely.
I just want to do it.
Yeah.
It's my dream. It's always been my dream. How can I not have my dream come true? I just couldn't do it till now, but I'm doing it, man. And if we understand everybody's got a dream, and we all encourage each other's dreams instead of saying, be afraid, be very afraid. Your dream will never come true. That's never going to happen. And we all have that little inner voice inside of us. That's called Saturn in my land. And you have a 3-year-old Saturn, so he's pretty bossy in your land. I just want you to know.
Yeah.
And you have a little 3-year-old. It's very literal. Carren, you can't do that. And you're like, okay. And then the rest of you go, you're just a little runty 3-year-old. Who are you telling me to do things? So you have to kind of go through that dialogue with yourself, right?
Yeah.
We all have it. We all have it somewhere. And in understanding that our vision of who we are as people is so important, and how we hold precious the beauty of our lives and the beauty of all the relationships that we're in, because even the bad relationships teach us something. We don't have to stay in them. We do have to go, okay, what did I learn from that one? Okay, out of here. But it's understanding, the beauty of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people will go through their relationships and go through their experiences, and they land up becoming relatively benign because they don't seek out what was there for them to learn, which then, creates greater expansion for them. Mm-hmm. So what would you suggest in closing? Because, I mean, I feel like we could just keep talking forever on this. This is such a fascinating topic to me. What would you suggest that people do if they want to know more about who they are individually and then what they can do to contribute to that collective? Because I really hear what you say. We're all here for something. And if we can get clarity on that, and, to the extent that it's possible to get clarity and certainty on what to do, then how we go and do it, lining up with our greatest purpose, at least it gives us a little bit more direction so that we then don't become susceptible or vulnerable to the fear or to the Saturn voice. What do you think is the best thing for people to do that are listening to the show right now as a next step?
What I always say to people is, like, if you turn inward and you listen to the inside positive voice, not the one that says you can't do stuff, but the voice that says, how can I grow today? Or what is the best use of my life today? What is the best use of my soul? We get it. We know what it is. What happens is we get distracted by the world. We get distracted by the TV. We get distracted by the fear. We get given someone else's emotions. And if we can tap into our core and say, okay, what actually am I supposed to be learning here? What is the kindness I can do? What is the greater good I can do? And stand in that place and do that first thing in the morning. Then what you've done is you've set the intention for the day to do the greatest good for yourself and the world around you. And I find that's a very powerful mantra. And invariably people pick either their Saturn or their Neptune, because they go, when I connect into my soul knows what I want. It's all the other voices that say to me, I can't. And I always say to people, when someone says to you, you can't do something, that's their vision of what you can do. What's your vision? And so often, well, I really want to, but I don't know if I can. And I said, well, you didn't learn to walk by, wondering if you could. You just got up and did it. And so if we sit and we do that creative thing that we always wanted to do for 10 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes, it sets the tone for the day where we're allowing ourselves. So you always wanted to play piano, you always wanted to dance, and you're working in a job you really don't like. Well, get up and dance for 10 minutes in the morning. Activate the joy. Activate the desire nature of your soul and let it go, I danced. So the rest of the day I can handle, because I've created in that moment the beauty, the grace, the connection to divine that I needed to allow myself to move forward in the world and help it. And then anytime you're out of tune, take a minute, go deep and breathe and kind of go, okay, what am I learning? Okay, let me let that go. Now, ground again, connect into the joy. If we connect into the joy, if we connect into what nurtures us, it just makes our life work. You know, and that is usually what it is. When I say to someone, if it's in your heart, it's in your chart someplace.
Yeah.
Let's go find it. You know, when I'm dealing with someone who's at a career moment, and I'll talk about it, and they'll be, well, I always wanted to, but my father, my brother, I couldn't make any money. You know, I'm like, you don't have to make money to dance. You just have to dance. You don't have to make money to paint art. You just have to do art. And once you start doing it, your joy comes back, and then you're operating from a place of happiness and love and wholeness instead of from a place of I can't have my dream. And we all have a dream. If you have the dream to be a dancer, it's in there. So dance, you know, or whatever. And allow. Your mother had a dream to study philosophy and to write, and she's doing it. You know, it's just, you know, give yourself permission to do it every day, and you live in the joy. And I think that's the best we can do. If we live in the joy, we're constantly connected to our charts and to our souls. And then we're always going to be on path.
Oh, so profound. And you know what I love is that it's not just a case of it being words that you're using, like for the sake of speaking, which I do find a lot in today's society. Mm-hmm. But what you're giving is an actual how. You're giving the actual how do I do that? Well, you know, if it's in your heart, do it. Just put yourself in the joy, and then that takes you into that state of grace, and give yourself permission to do that for 10 minutes every morning. And then, as you say, that sets the intention, it sets the tone of your day, and it allows your soul's journey, I guess, to be fulfilled in those moments.
Well, because you're then in alignment with your heart.
Yeah.
Right? When you're living and doing the thing you love the most, whether it's hugging your children or petting your cat or, you know, whatever it is, it can be some people it's playing video games.
Yeah.
It makes them feel connected to their being, or cooking or bake, you know, you just kind of go, yeah, I always feel so much better when I do that.
Yeah.
I should do that every day. And we forget, you know, like, no. Self-care. Gorgeous. Focusing on the good intention and your chart will say what it is.
Yeah.
Basically, look at your moon and look at your Venus, because those are the places to go. Whatever your moon is, so for you, it's talking to people. Okay. You get incredibly turned on talking to people.
I do.
And you get incredibly turned on learning about things.
I do.
And if you either one of those, you don't need to eat. You need to learn something, travel, talk to people, and you're a happy person.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's all you need every day. And what are you doing 7:30 in the morning in Australia right now? You're talking to me, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. You started your day off with a good intention, right? It's going to be one of the best days of your life today. I can just tell you, you know.
It will be, and I can feel it.
Because you set the intention to say, this is what I love. And I'm doing it today. And I started the day off with what I love. How can it go bad?
This is awesome.
Because all I have to do is, when it goes bad, is I just have to remember, I had a really good time this morning. Let me just go sit in that moment, and then let me go forward again. Because it's our they're our touchstones. They hold us and they ground us, you know.
Oh, this has been an amazing conversation, Anne. Absolutely amazing. I'm about to bring the show to an end for everybody who's listening to the show, but honestly, I tell you what, you want to go and have a session with Anne if you haven't. Before I hang up this call, I'm going to be booking in a session with Anne for myself, because I can see that there's enormous value for me in terms of my next step. You know, sometimes we get to the point where we don't know what else there is because our lives are so full with everything that is. But it's also really cool to be able to have a little bit of clarity and direction. And I love, my dad once said, you know, when you know who you are and you can label it, then you can pull out that tool, you can pull out that sense of certainty and use it on purpose. And I think that in and of itself is priceless. And my friend, thank you so much for joining us on Carren's Couch today. This has been such an inspiring conversation. I feel $1 million. And the day's just begun, and you know.
I know, it's great. Yeah.
It is. It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
For all of our
most
listeners,
appreciated.
Oh, my love! What a treat. What a treat. If you guys want to get your hands on more of Anne's work, go to Anne, and that's Anne with an E on the end of it, .com, and download her articles. She's also got 3 podcasts that she delivers each week. So there's Anne Ortelee's Weekly Weather, there's Access Astrologers, and there's also Scorpios Talking. So go to her podcast and download them, subscribe to her lists and download those podcasts so that you can get this kind of feeling of connectedness and oneness every week. Also, Anne is doing sessions with $25 off. So we're going to have the link that you can click on to access a session with Anne and take advantage of that $25 discount. So that will be underneath this podcast on the Carren's Couch website, and that's carrenscouch.com for those of you guys who are listening to the podcast. So join us here next week on Carren's Couch, where we have more insight and more extraordinary information that we're delivering, where we talk about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, all with the intention of inspiring and enlivening and enlightening you. So don't waste another moment. Go to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating if you've been listening to the podcast. You can also go to our website and leave us your comments on all the W's, .carrenscouch.com. And of course, we love to hang out with you on Facebook and on social media. So you can find us at all the W's, facebook.com/Carren's Couch. Go and post your comments and tell us about your thoughts on today's podcast, because we really want to hear all about it. And if you have a session with Anne, make sure you let us know how that went, because I'm certainly going to have a session with Anne and I'll keep you guys all updated. So thanks again for joining us here on Carren's Couch. We're going to see you here same time, same station next week. All my love. Have a wonderful week. Bye for now.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.